don't even realize that if it wasn't for the civil rights movement, if it wasn't for that,
yes,
there would not be 22 million Asian Americans in this country.
Thank you. So. And what I have been trying to teach the Asian community is like, friends, do you understand that your success, your prosperity, your civil rights that you enjoy right now was paid for with Black blood, yes, right? And the fact that you don't recognize that shows you how much you take this for granted and how much you don't care about the future.
This place is mine too. The institutions are mine too. And I'm not giving it up to anybody. You see, and there's a long tradition here of how to fight for an America that reflects the people. Because we're arguing over who the people actually are.
America has grown to its next phase of its hatred of Black Americans. A phase that has matured to you no longer need to be white. You can even be brown as long as you are in adherence to the orchestrated hatred campaign of Black Americans. Now wait, before you click off because you think this is mere emotion and race baiting, let me show you two recent political standoffs in the news where both philosophically led by white men and have turned Blacks against Asians and Asians against Blacks.
The problem is we have this internal vision of America as a place of true equity, as a place of fairness and justice, without acknowledging the fact that those things have to be fought for. They don't just happen because you wish it. They happen because people go in the streets and demand it. And our communities have gotten complacent and have forgotten the history.
Oftentimes we think we bring character to the moment, right? Intact, whole, and then we just enact it as we move forward. Character is shaped in the ongoing necessity to make choices in the face of conflicting values, right? And so the kinds of people we will become is, where do you stand on this issue?
Now, one thing, I don't know about you, but I'm still trying to like make sense and reflect on all the Latinos and all the Asian people that voted for Donald Trump. So then what does that say about whiteness as ideology?
A group of parents in Virginia have asked the Supreme Court whether or not an admissions policy meant to diversify one of the country's top public schools is racially discriminatory.
The group, called the Coalition for TJ, is accusing Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology of racially discriminating against Asian American students.
Now, the accusations stem from a new admissions process meant to increase Black and Hispanic enrollments, leading to a decrease in Asian American students. This comes 2 months after the court rejected affirmative action banning colleges from considering race as a factor in admissions.
They've had underrepresentation of Blacks and Latinos. After George Floyd's murder, like many other institutions, the school board that governs the school decided to rethink its admissions policy with the hopes of expanding access. And under the old system, a majority of the students at TJ came from a very limited number of elite middle schools in Fairfax County, one of the wealthiest counties in the state. Asian parents sued, that benefited under the old policy, sued. But the Court of Appeals, the Fourth Circuit, looked at the record and said there was no evidence whatsoever that the school board intentionally was discriminating against Asians. What they were trying to do was broaden access.
I always tell people the day the Latino, African American, Asian, and other communities realize that they share the same oppressor is the day we start winning. Because we are the majority in this country now. We have the ability to take over this country and to do what is needed for everyone and to make things fair.
Psalm 24 tells us, the earth is the Lord's and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it. I actually like the King James Version better. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. If we believe that as kingdom citizens, then passages like these should authoritatively influence how we view opportunity, resources, our possessions, and positions on this earth. Historically and recently in the news, we have continuously witnessed enmity and politicized attempts of oppression between the Black and Asian communities. I want to share some of these situations with you to pose this question. Do the Black and Asian churches, which are filled with Jesus' kingdom citizens, have the opportunity to annihilate the oppressors in America through reconciliation, collaboration, and the courage to go to war together against the America that influenced them to hate one another? My name is Darren Greenfield, and this is what we will hold in tension during this week's weekly wrap-up. Gene Wu, a Democratic member of the Texas House of Representatives, is right. Black blood has paid for a lot in this country. Still, its currency exchange rate never converts to appreciation, privilege, safety, or its piece of the American pie like so many other ethnicities. Other ethnicities have found those very things in America by either literally or figuratively joining in the beating of the backs of Black people or climbing to success off the backs of Black people. In recent years, Black America has been targeted by new bandwagon oppressors. What are bandwagon oppressors? They are those who have been given the opportunity to buy a minority stake in Team America. Yet the contract always has something devious towards Black America in its terms and conditions. Check this box if you understand that to experience privilege in this hijacked so-called white America, you must agree in principle, participate, and articulate that no matter what, because of the fictionalized inferiority and politicized disqualification, Black people should not have their piece of this American pie. The very America that they've had the lion's share of building, but the mouse's share of owning.
When I think about racism, I think less about like individual acts or individual experiences, although those matter. And I think more about structural things and like systemic things and about the tangible conditions that most of our people live in. And with that, my question is, at what point do Black people say we're going to stop relying on the very institutions that cause the problems that we face and begin to build our own institutions to solve our problems ourselves?
Right. I appreciate that question. There's a long tradition of that argument going all the way back to the founding of the Republic. All right. Paul Cuffey, one of the first Black millionaires, argues that we should build our own institutions. In fact, he has a shipping industry, a shipping company that looks to Liberia as a place to repatriate in some ways. So this is a long-standing argument in African-American letters. But I want to suggest and I want to insist that these institutions do not belong to anyone other than the people. And we are the people. I don't want to concede the argument. Let me put it this way. America is an idea, that's true. But America is also an argument. It's a fight. And I'm not conceding that fight to anybody. My great-grandmama is buried. You see that country boy? My mom, great-grandmama? My great-grandmother is buried in Moss Point, Mississippi. The woman who spent her life in the kitchens of white folks on the coast of Mississippi, made the best pinto beans you could imagine, had some Kool-Aid in the refrigerator, had the perfect balance between sugar and water. She's buried there. This place is mine too. The institutions are mine too. And I'm not giving it up to anybody. You see? So I suggest coming in, there's a long tradition here of how to fight for an America that reflects the people. Because we're arguing over who the people actually are, right? And I'm not an object of charity for the people. I'm a member of the people, if that makes sense. You feel me? I hope we can have an argument about that.
Yes, America has grown to its next phase of its hatred of Black Americans, a phase that has matured to you no longer need to be white. You can even be brown as long as you are in adherence to the orchestrated hatred campaign of Black Americans. Now wait, before you click off because you think this is mere emotion and race baiting, let me show you two recent political standoffs in the news that were both philosophically led by white men.
A group of parents in Virginia have asked the Supreme Court whether or not an admissions policy meant to diversify one of the country's top public schools is racially discriminatory.
The group, called the Coalition for TJ, is accusing Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology of racially discriminating against Asian American students.
Now, the accusations stem from a new admissions process meant to increase Black and Hispanic enrollments, leading to a decrease in Asian American students. This comes 2 months after the court rejected affirmative action banning colleges from considering race as a factor in admissions. So what's happening here? We're joined now by Cheryl Cashin. She's an author and law professor there at Georgetown. Cheryl, help us understand this case a bit more, because I understand it's been an ongoing battle between this parents group and TJ High School. Give us a bit of background there.
Right. So TJ is virtually the #1 public school in the country. For years, they've had underrepresentation of Blacks and Latinos. After George Floyd's murder, like many other institutions, the school board that governs the school decided to rethink its admissions policy with the hopes of expanding access. And under the old system, a majority of the students at TJ came from a very limited number of elite middle schools in Fairfax County, one of the wealthiest counties in the state. But it just so happens that the attendance zone of TJ covers 6 jurisdictions, much broader, and there are citizens who can't afford to buy their way into Fairfax who subsidize and pay taxes for TJ. So what did they do? They adopted a new system that guaranteed that every single middle school in TJ's attendance zone could send the top 1.5% of their students to TJ. And then with the remaining 100 places, they scrapped a high stakes test and decided to look at everybody, evaluate everybody based on GPA, a problem solving exercise. And they gave extra points, a plus factor, not based on race, but on low income, or if you came from an underrepresented school, you were an English language learner, or you had a special education situation, right? And what happened was, yes, the Asian representation went down, but low-income Asians actually went way up in their representation. And yes, the representation of Blacks and Latinos and poor students went up. Asian parents sued that benefited under the old policy, sued. But the Court of Appeals, the Fourth Circuit, looked at the record and said there was no evidence whatsoever that the school board intentionally was discriminating against Asians. What they were trying to do was broaden access.
Kingdom citizens. Psalm 24:1 not only tells us that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. In verse 2, it tells us how he established the earth. But in verses 3 and 4, it speaks of something we must all have in accordance with being right with God. Listen to what it says. Who may ascend into the hill of the Lord, and who may stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted up his soul to falsehood and has not sworn deceitfully. Colossians 1 verses 13 through 17 tell us, for he rescued us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And remember what James tells us in James 4 through 7. What is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? Is not the source your pleasures, that you wage war in your members? You lust and you do not have, so you commit murder. You are envious and you cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, so that you may spend it on your pleasures. You adulterous, do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility toward God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you think that the scripture speaks to no purpose? He jealously desires the Spirit which he has made to dwell in us, but he gives a greater grace. Therefore, it says, God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit, therefore, to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. Now, what kind of philosophy did we witness in that video? Here's what kind of philosophy it was. It's a philosophy of scarcity for the sake of greed, a philosophy of claiming discrimination to practice discrimination, a philosophy of hatred for advancement. All of these philosophies belong to the domain of darkness and are ushered in by people who promise others light in order to use them as puppets for darkness. Now, let me tell you about the man behind these changes in our education system. And now let me tell you about the man behind these changes in our education system. His name is Edward Bloom. Edward Bloom has been the architect of legal attacks on civil rights protections that benefit all people of color. Look at what the ACLU says about him in this article. The U.S. Supreme Court recently decided on 2 cases concerning affirmative action brought by Bloom's conservative activist group, Students for Fair Admissions. These decisions have made it unconstitutional for universities across the country to consider a student's race as one factor in their holistic admissions review process. After losing a congressional election in the early 1990s, Bloom, who is white, challenged the Texas redistricting process, claiming it discriminated in favor of African American and Latinx voters. In the case Bush versus Vera, he achieved limited success in particular districts, but he didn't stop there. Bloom was the driving force behind Shelby versus Holder, a case that gutted important protections in the Voting Rights Act with devastating effects for voters of color. After failing in his case, Fisher versus University of Texas, where he unsuccessfully challenged race-conscious college admissions programs, Bloom made a move. He openly admitted that he needed Asian plaintiffs. This led him to form Students for Fair Admissions as a vehicle for litigation. But here's what is crucial to understand. The organization's leadership consists solely of Mr. Bloom, Abigail Fisher, and Richard Fisher, her father. Through this organization, Bloom recruited members and filed his challenge to college admissions against Harvard and the University of North Carolina, but with a new twist. This time, he claimed that the consideration of race discriminates against Asian Americans instead of using white Americans. But let's be clear. Bloom isn't seeking to ensure that universities adequately address any implicit bias against Asian Americans. He's not asking them to take affirmative steps to recognize the value of Asian American applicants. This is critical to understand, because Bloom's cynical attempt to use members of the Asian American community seeks to pit people of color against one another. What are the consequences? Well, statistical projections show that white applicants will be the primary beneficiaries of these changes. Not talking about race doesn't erase discrimination. It reinforces the privileges of white applicants by ignoring the ways in which deep-seated structural racial inequality impacts individuals. Now that Edward Bloom has accomplished ending affirmative action on college campuses, guess what? He is now aiming to do the same in high school classrooms, not only in Virginia, but also in Boston, as published in news articles at the end of 2024. So I know you're asking the question, What does this have to do with Black and Asian churches? I'm pretty sure that there are Christians that are part of these parent groups on both sides of the argument. If not, I know for sure that there are churches in these areas that need to speak up about this and help the parents and communities figure this out. I'm going to give us a roadmap forward after hearing our second story and seeing how these philosophies of darkness do not only touch our educational institutions, but how they also aim to change the entire existence of certain communities and the identity makeup of cities.
There's also new support now for a proposed Sixers arena and apartment building in Center City.
These are the renderings of the project at 10th and Market Streets. It includes a high-rise with residential space right next to the arena itself. The proposal has faced criticism and opposition, especially from residents in nearby Chinatown. However, the 76ers and supporters argue it will bring an economic boost to the area. Today, the Black clergy of Philadelphia announced its support for the project.
When we speak or chime in on an issue, it matters to us and the people who we represent. We are confident that this is a huge net plus benefit to the whole city.
I'm Quincy Harris, media personality, son of Philadelphia, from Germantown, graduated from Temple University. I'm nervous and I'm excited because this opportunity that we have is once in a lifetime. My dad, he's about to be, I shouldn't tell his age, but he's about to be 74 next month. And I talked to him about it. He worked for the city of Philadelphia. He fixed traffic lights. He was an electrical engineer for 35 years. And I was talking to him about this opportunity. I said, Dad, have you ever seen any opportunity like this for African Americans in this city since you've been here? And he was like, I can't really think of anything as monumental and historic as what's happening and what will be announced today for African Americans in this city. So I'm excited. Are you excited? Clap your hands. Come on, clap. Like, this is good. This is big. As I was driving my sons to school today, one's 11, one's 9, I'm just talking to them about the opportunity. And for them, because the work is being done, this is normal. This will be a normal life. Once this stadium is open in 2031, they'll be in their early adulthood and be able to be a part of what's happening in this great city of Philadelphia.
Now let's be real. NFL, NBA, MLB stadiums have been proven to be nothing more than a billionaire's playground. His high-tech sandbox used to watch his own players play with an athletic prowess that he wishes he possessed. This could be the reason why he pays them so much. But what is more concerning in that last video is that a white owner, Josh Harris, and his ownership team sent their Black DEI guy to recruit Black pastors to root and support a stadium that will rip apart the land, culture, and serenity of an Asian neighborhood. Now, did you ever stop and consider why they picked Black pastors and not white pastors or white workers to stand there at this 20-minute press conference? Here's my answer. It's because of the enmity that sits between our communities.
Like for Asian Americans and for African Americans, we probably have one of the worst relationships between any community. The history of our nation is replete with instances and examples of leaders using minority communities, immigrant communities especially, as scapegoats to turn them into a Frankenstein's monster, to say, that's the problem, that's who's causing it. When in reality, nobody asked Dr. Frankenstein, what have you done? What have you done to make this thing?
Black Kingdom citizens, we can't be a part of white billionaires' ploy to rip apart an Asian community at any cost, but especially not to the tune of a deceitful lie about Black jobs. Here's what kills me about this. Every Black individual who is at these press conferences telling black people that this will promise jobs to them and their families are in a position where them or their kids will benefit from this so much on the front end that they will not even blink, or they will not be harmed or even feel the pain or disappointment when those jobs or that aid do not come to fruition. But this is what they will do. They will leave a bunch of other black people behind for empty promises. Now, if you watch me, you know I did a session earlier this month reviewing the agreement that is supposed to be made between the black community, the Sixers, and other individuals. And let's just say this: it's not worth the paper that it was signed on. So black and Asian churches, what do we need to do if we find ourselves having some responsibility in this place? The first thing is, we don't need to participate with the world in their sinful mess, but need to work together in a plan of reconciliation, collaboration, and find the courage to war together against the America that influences us to hate one another. So here's what we need to do in step one of reconciliation. We need to stop believing the American lie of scarcity and ownership and believe the biblical truth of abundance and stewardship. You can tell me anything, but do not tell me that there is a such thing as scarcity in America or anywhere else on the globe. There is selfishness, greed, mismanagement, exploitation, corruption, colonization, thievery, and many other issues. But scarcity is a lie that we've chosen to live by because the truth makes us share and actually treat people fairly. The problem is not scarcity. The problem is that we want to own everything, but our job from God is to steward these resources, these positions, and these possessions with justice, equity, and compassion. Listen to what God tells his people throughout the scriptures about land, opportunity, and possessions. Leviticus 25:23. The Lord says, "The land, moreover, shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine, for you are but aliens and sojourners with me." In this text, God is establishing that he is the owner, that we are just sojourners and aliens, which is just another word for immigrants. That when it comes to us inhabiting this earth that we live on, that we all are immigrants. When it comes to us inhabiting this country that we have citizenship in, that we all are immigrants. Our job is to steward and to make room for one another and our families and ourselves within this land. But it is not to hoard and keep people out so we can control access. Luke 12:15. Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Life does not consist in an abundance of opportunity. Life does not consist in an abundance of resources." We know that we can hoard all these things and we can believe that people are trying to take them from us, but that does not make life better. In fact, it's been proven to make life worse. What about 1 Timothy 6, verses 6 through 12? Now, godliness combined with contentment brings great profit. For we have brought nothing into this world, and so we cannot take a single thing out either. But if we have food and shelter, we will be satisfied with that. Those who long to be rich, however, stumble into temptation and a trap and many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. Why are we talking about riches when we're talking about affirmative action and the enmity between the Black and Asian community? Because most of what is behind these actions, most of what is behind the lawsuits, most of what is behind what's going on in Philadelphia is about money. Most of it is about improving our financial standing. We want our kids to have great educations. Why? So they can be in good financial standing and continue to expand our legacy here on earth. That is not a bad thing to want, but it is a bad thing to want when we want it so bad that we are willing to block others out from being able to access it so we can hoard it to ourselves. Listen to what the rest of 1 Timothy says. For the love of money is the root of all evil. Some people, in reaching for it, have strayed from the faith and stabbed themselves with many pains. But you, as a person dedicated to God, keep away from all of that. Instead of filing lawsuits against high school and college affirmative action, instead of convincing Black people to jump on board with destroying a neighborhood for the sake of a sports stadium, instead pursue righteousness, godliness, faithfulness, love, endurance, and gentleness. Compete well for what? For the faith, and lay hold of that eternal life you were called for and made your good confession, for in the presence of many witnesses. And we can't forget about Colossians 3:4-5. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you too will be revealed in glory with him. So put to death whatever in your nature belongs to the earth: sexual immorality, impurity, shameful passion, watch this, evil desire, and greed, which is idolatry. For step 2 of reconciliation, we need to unsubscribe from whiteness as an ideology and subscribe to love thy neighbor as I love myself as our ideology. We need to unsubscribe from competition and subscribe to harmony and collaboration. Look at what Paul says in Ephesians 3:7-13, of which I was made a minister according to the gift of God's grace, which was given to me according to the working of his power. To me, the very least of all saints, this grace was given to preach to the Gentiles the unfathomable riches of Christ, and to bring to light what is the administration of the mystery which for ages has been hidden in God who created all things. Watch this. So that the manifold wisdom of God might be made known through who? The church, the Black church, the Asian church, all of the church, to the rulers and the authorities in the heavenly places. This was in accordance with the eternal purpose which he carried out in Christ Jesus our Lord, in whom we have boldness and confident access through faith in him. Therefore I ask you not to lose heart at my tribulations on your behalf, for they are your glory. Now, there are 4 things that we need to see in this passage and adopt from Paul's attitude to achieve harmony and collaboration. The first thing is we need to bow down and submit to God's sovereignty, that God's sovereignty makes a way for us to experience the proper amount of opportunity that he has designated for us, and it keeps us from hoarding opportunity. The second thing we need to see is God's grace. Paul says that this grace was given to him. When we hoard opportunity, we try to redirect the destination of God's grace. We believe that we deserve it more than others. In the videos that were a part of this session, Asian parents thought they deserved more enrollment spots, and Black people felt they deserved jobs over a community's living space. In recognizing our greed and competition, we let God distribute his grace without us trying to guide it. The third point, Paul's true impact is felt through the working of God's power. Now, I know many successful, powerless people in God's economy. They've schemed, hoarded, manipulated, and stole from others to become these so-called powerful people. But in God's eyes, they are powerless. Let's make sure that our agendas, of advocacy around our lives and the lives of others is used in a way that God sends his power to accompany and complete it, and does not send his power to destroy it because we are on the wrong side of his standard. And then point number 4, humility. Paul considers to see himself as the least of all. Paul considers himself the least and allows God's will to make him great in whichever endeavor God chooses. He doesn't have entitlement that makes him believe he deserves opportunity. He allows God to make room for him and doesn't begin to sue people based upon what he thinks he deserves or what he wants to hoard. Finally, we need to notice something crucial for reconciliation in this passage: the manifold wisdom of God. The passage says, so that the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known through who? The church. To who? Rulers and authorities in heavenly places. This manifold wisdom of God means a multicolored wisdom, a variously colored wisdom. Actually, in the text, it uses the same word as Joseph's robe back in the book of Genesis. It speaks of diversity. And this diverse wisdom will be made known through the church to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. Listen to this. We can change situations like this just through reconciliation, harmony, and collaboration as the Black and Asian community. But if we're going to do that, we don't only need reconciliation, we need collaboration. What do we need to collaborate on? We need to collaborate on healing from our history.
We have a lot of people coming from China within the last 20 years. And their vision of America is what they've seen on TV in China and other places. And they come here and they say, everything's wonderful. Why do I care about civil rights? Why do I care about immigration laws? Why do I care about any of this stuff? Everything is great. I'm making lots of money. People leave me alone. But they have never seen that the history of Chinese people in this country, the brutal, horrific history and the terrible things that have been done to our people in this nation over the last 200 years. Older, more established Chinese Americans saying, hey guys, things were really bad in the past, not that long ago, right? We were banned from coming into this country until 1965. That ain't that long ago.
We were banned.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yes, people forget that.
Right? And I mean, we had the Chinese Exclusion Act.
The Chinese Exclusion Act, the first U.S. law restricting immigration based on race.
It lasted from 1882 to 1965. In 1942, the government repealed it on paper. They repealed it on paper to satisfy the Chinese government so they can unite and fight against the Japanese in World War II. But they hated our communities so much that they kept those policies in place just by sheer force of will for another 20 years.
We need to heal from our hatred together. We need to fight for a better human experience for not only our people, but for all minorities and immigrants. This country has hated us and then acted like they loved us when they need us to play basketball in their stadiums or join their initiatives to get rid of affirmative action. What they put us through as an Asian and Black community has filled us with hatred. Instead of processing through that hatred, we have allowed them to continuously manipulate us to take it out on one another. We have to heal from being hated and then conditionally accepted. It's the seesaw of what it means not to be white in America. We have to heal. We have to heal from stories like Latasha Harlins and Soon Jadu.
Hi, my name is Kaylin Womack, and I'm a staff writer at The Root. This weekend, I'm taking you to Vermont Vista, Los Angeles, to explore the story of Latasha Harlins on this episode of Small Town Horrors. 15-year-old Latasha Harlins was sent to the corner store by her mom. After walking into Empire Liquor Market on 91st Street and Figueroa Avenue, she went to the refrigerator section and picked up a $1.79 bottle of orange juice. After briefly putting the bottle in her bag, she walked toward the cash register and pulled her money out to pay. Despite her having money in hand, the cashier, Soonja Do, missed a glimpse of the cash and accused Harlins of stealing merchandise. Surveillance cameras show that Do grabbed Harlan's hair and banged her head on the counter while grabbing the bottle from her bag. Harlins then threw a few punches at Do and tried to escape her grasp. Do then threw a stool at her as she tried to make it toward the exit of the store. However, Do grabbed her gun and fired a shot at the back of Harlan's head, killing her instantly. Do's husband, who was sleeping in a van outside, rushed in after hearing the shot. Do fainted in her husband's arms, and he called 911 to report an attempted robbery. Police didn't find any evidence that Harlins was shoplifting, and Do was found guilty of manslaughter. Do faced 16 years in prison, but was only sentenced to 5 years probation. The tension in the black community around the case was already heightened because of the Rodney King beating by LAPD officers. Just days after Harlins was killed, the officers in the King's beating were acquitted. As a result of the tensions between black people and Korean American merchants, Do's store was looted and burned to the ground. Harlan's death is remembered as one of the sparks of the LA riots, and she's been referenced in music from the time, including Tupac's Keep Your Head Up and many other songs in his discography.
What does healing mean? Healing means listening. Healing means talking. Healing means apologizing. Healing means learning to trust again. Healing means calling out the oppressor and not aligning with them again. How do we collaborate? By taking the best of our worlds and celebrating them together. We collaborate by taking the worst of our worlds and investigate them together. We collaborate by taking the best of our worlds and fighting the oppressor together. We collaborate when they call on us to oppose one another. We take both of our worlds, put them together, and say no. Kingdom citizens, for my final call to action, you as the church, in the manifold wisdom of God that he wants to be seen through you, will have to lead on this. Here are a few places that you can start right away. Number one, don't use Dr. King Day that is coming up as a cleanup day this January. Get together with a black church if you're an Asian congregation, with an Asian church if you're a black congregation. Share histories, stories, and economic advice. Put on a forum supported by both black and Asian churches of similar demographics. What do I mean similar demographics? I think that if there's an affluent Asian church, they should be matched in the beginning with an affluent African-American church. If there is a poor Asian church, they should be matched with a poor African-American church. Why? Because of the deep-rooted capitalism in how we live out our Christianity in America. I don't know if we are safe for one another to be dealing with one another on different ends of the socioeconomic spectrum, because within those different ends, there is a power dynamic. And how the power dynamic usually works is that those who do not have the resources become a charity case, and those who do have the resources begin to believe that they're doing a better job by just giving that which is no sacrifice to them.
And I'm not an object of charity for the people. I'm a member of the people.
We must worship together. This worship must be centered around Jesus. It must be centered around hard questions and big ideas that push us as communities out of courtrooms attached to white supremacist agendas of suing one another, out of city council rooms, fighting for a stadium to be built and bulldoze someone's neighborhood. But we must find a way to get ourselves out of all of that, to reconcile with one another, and find the courage to take on who Gene Wu pointed out are the same oppressors for all of us. I hope this was a blessing for you. We'll see you on next week's wrap up.